Good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Vikas Shah, and like it was said, I am a son of the soil. Spent most of my life in Jammu and have traveled through the length and breadth of the city. In fact, I'm an ex-alumni of Model Academy when it was close to the KC Theatre for about a year. That's what I was telling the rest of the people here. So I had this choice of what to talk about today, and I had a lot of experiences, but I thought, let me try to pick up a topic which is very topical today, which is water. By the way, I'm not a water specialist. I was in telecom for a long time, came into water, and I believe as professionals you do what you do, but you don't necessarily need to get a tag of a specialist. So I talk about in a very laymanish language what water is all about, and what are the challenges that world faces, and then specifically India, and some of the potential solutions which may happen over a period of time. Yeah. So that's the summary. So I'll talk about the water availability, India and the world. I'll talk about problems. Again, I'll try to make it very simple, not use any jargon so that it's understandable. And then I'll talk about my perspective. There's a utopian way in which the water problems could be solved. And then there's a pragmatic or the more conventional way, which is built or driven by political compulsions. Yeah? So let's start. I don't know if you've seen this. See, India, Earth is a watery planet. 70% of the planet is water, right? But very few of us will actually know or realize that only 0.01% of that water can be used by humans as fresh water consumption. The 70% which is brackish or the salt water is locked away in the sea and the oceans, and the rest of the water is locked up in the glaciers and Antarctic and Arctic and so on and so forth. So it can't be extracted feasibly for the humans to use. So this 0.01% water is one which you see in the rivers, in the lakes, in the groundwater, in the aquifer. All of that put together is no more than 0.01. So that's the kind of water we have to deal with. Now, as it is in a watery planet, that's not very good news. Yeah? But if that was not enough, this is how the global landscape looks like. Now, I'm specifically keeping away from the part of waterborne diseases. This is my business, by the way. So I don't want it to be a promotion of what we do. So I'm just keeping it there for the extent of understanding or explaining that 1 in 10 people don't have access to clean and safe water. So roughly around 800 million people globally from a total population of a little less than 8 billion. But the larger point that you need to understand is that, look at India. 4% of world's freshwater reserves, but 16% of the world's population. Now, if I take the same view and look at the world of this part of the globe, US has 17% of the water reserves and only 3.5% of the world population. Canada, top. 1% of the world population, 8.5% of the reserves. So these countries are lopsidedly in an advantageous position vis-a-vis India. So this is something that you need to keep in mind as we go forward in the presentation. Very important point, and I'll touch upon that, the implications of it. Yeah. This will happen in India in 2040. 2040, you will not have water. So all these red or the maroonish areas that you see, you will not find water even if you go 15 to 2,000 feet below the ground. And this is not too far away, right? It's roughly 20 years away. Yeah. And guess what? Look at all these countries around which are also shaded in red and maroon. These countries are also going to be water deficient. Okay? India is going to be water stressed. So that's reality. And we have to deal with it because the telltale signs of how this planet is going to unfold in its water consumption is not going to be a secret anymore. This is for all of you to see. Yeah? Now let me show you another interesting slide. Okay. One fact check. Water leads to crops, to cultivation and food, right? All of you know that. So if you have to determine how much water is moving between countries, all you have to do is determine how much food is moving between countries because it's a derivative of water, isn't it? So India, as you know, is a food surplus country and India exports a lot of food stuff. And that's good because just before independence, when there was a major famine in West Bengal, India started the Green Revolution and they said, never in our lifetimes will we see this again. Good. But what has happened now is India has taken that decision and that argument way too far. The reason for that is India
has in water terms exported close to 96 billion meter cube of water. So this is, India is the next exporter here, right? Which are the other net exporters in the world? It's North America, South America. But guess what? They are water surplus. So they have every reason to do this because they have water. India, if you refer to the previous slide, in case you have forgotten this, is a water stressed country. So India has no business to be exporting agricultural products. Yeah? Keep this data point. I'll come back to that later. Let's move on. So now here's the other paradox or irony. Most of you, if I ask you what is your water bill, I'm sure you'll not even remember it, right? It must be a few hundred rupees, if not 60, 70 rupees or something like that. Guess what? Every passing day that you pay such a nominal and inconsequential price for water, the price of water actually increases because it's a perishable quantity. It's not there forever. Refer the first slide, right? So what happens? The less you pay, the more you aggravate the problem, and therefore the aggravation leads to a higher value and higher price. That's the irony of it. To keep another data point in your mind. Moving on. Let's drill deeper and figure out where is the water consumed. 3 sectors, and many of you may know it if you have gone to the internet. So you have agriculture, industry, domestic. What is the problem? The problem with agriculture is it's inefficient. The yield that we extract, despite being a water deficient country, is much lower than international standards. Okay? So that's inefficiency. I'll talk about other inefficiencies in a moment. The inefficiency or the problem with industry is that industry has 2 segments. The large plants who cannot receive a license without doing the business, and smaller plants who are contaminating, like textile industries, chemical industries, so on and so forth. The smaller plants want to be conforming, but they don't have the money. The larger plants have no choice, so they make the investment in being conforming. By and large, I'll say it's a mixed bag, but not too bad. Third one is the domestic consumption. Although figuratively or actually it's only 8% of the requirement nationally, but the need for water is far more intense and dense in a very small area for domestic use. For example, Delhi NCR area, a radius of 250 kilometers of population of 3.5 crores, has a substantially high need than the rest of the country. So these are dense pockets even though overall requirement is low. Yeah? Now let's drill deeper in each problem. So farming. I don't know how many of you are aware. The average land holding size per farmer in India is 1.1 hectare, which is roughly 2.7 acres. Nowhere, regardless of whatever you do, can you make that a profitable model. And I'll tell you why. The best case scenario is you make 30,000 rupees per acre if your crop or your season is not good, or you make 50,000 rupees an acre, all costs thrown in. So if you have 2.5 or 3 acres, you make 1.5 lakh rupees best case scenario, 90 lakh rupees worst case scenario. Will that make people survive? I don't think so. Worse, 13% of farmers are the only ones who have more than 5 acres of land. So ab initio, it's not a problem or a model that is survivable. The land holding has to be larger, and that's one of the reasons why there's farmer distress. Now you can give free power, you can loan waivers and all that stuff, but the model ab initio doesn't work. Now, I'm not here to contest or to pass a judgment on that. I'm trying to tie it back to water, and I will do that, but I'm explaining the flaw in the model itself. Let's move to industry. Industry, I just explained to you, so I'll not spend too much time there. There's the small industrial enterprises and the bigger ones, and there's a problem with both. I believe the problem is not that significant because they are more or less falling in line, as the case may be. And finally, domestic. I'll come to that, the solution of what the domestic issue is. But the limited point you need to keep in mind is 56 million. How much water we are exporting? Very good. Very good. Yes, 96 million. So 96 million. So more than double of what we need for urban area, which by the way is not completely satisfied. We need double that amount, is getting exported. If we had not done that, we would have satiated the entire demand. So keep that data point in mind. Now, if you have to now give a scorecard to these 3 sectors, this is my view of how I will rate them. And I'm rating them on 4 criteria. I'm saying consumption efficiency, callous, indisciplined, compliant, idealistic. It's a scaled up model where you go from the lowest to the top. And what is my verdict? And again, these are my personal verdict. You may choose to disagree. Agriculture, Callous use, completely callous use. Again, not a judgment of the farming or the farmers per se, but the whole concept of the model or the use of water. Industry, I would say, is compliant. One would argue and say, is 60-70% compliant? Probably yes, 30% is not, it doesn't matter, but you're still getting there. Domestic, I would say, is fundamentally indisciplined. In my lifetime, I believe the compliant industry could possibly move to idealistic situation and the indisciplined could move to compliant. I don't think callous will move at all. That's my personal view. I think it's going to stay there for political and other reasons. What is the solution? The land ceiling of farming should be removed. I know that's a very major statement and politically unpalatable. But the only way to save this sector is to allow private sector to come in and allow the land ceiling act to go away and let them own, and therefore employ the farmers, give them a wage so that they don't have to go farm distress, and ensure that they get a profit share as well. That automatically will take away all the subsidies and the indiscipline and inefficiency from the farming sector. That in itself will be a huge upside as far as the farming sector is concerned, which is the corporate thing. The second one which I'm talking about is the virtual water trading. I said the derivative of cultivation is water. Instead of exporting, export what you're good at, services, IT. Why should you be cultivating? We should not be a cultivator's country. That's not what gets you money. There is South America, which has a very good way of doing efficient agriculture. There is Africa, which has very good way and tropical climate for doing it. We should focus on what we are good at. So get rid of exporting water and focus on your core strengths in this particular case. And last but not the least, don't drink fruit flour. I live in Hyderabad, Telangana. I go on the highway. People like to eat rice in Telangana. That's their staple thing. Telangana is water stressed, there's limited water. But because farmers like to eat rice and people want to eat rice, guess what? They're only cultivating paddy. And you know what? In the last 10 years, the water table has gone from 70 to 400, but yet they are pumping water. And you know why? Because power is free. Power is free. All you need is put a pump and then switch it on. So completely flawed model. Free power leads to inefficiency, leads to issues which are completely unsustainable. For industry, I don't have much to say. I think more what I teach had. They'll figure their way out. See, because they can't do business. If you don't give them licenses, they're going to fall in line. So I have said what I said, but I wouldn't like to explain that much more. I think kicking and screaming, they'll reach the finish line sooner or later. Okay, domestic. This is a worldview. My sense before I came to the water industry was that there will be a correlation between tariff and consumption. Higher the tariff, lower the consumption, and vice versa. That was my belief. But when I look at the global examples, that's not how it works. There seems to be no method to the madness. For example, in Saudi Arabia, you have less availability of water, you also have less tariff because they have more money to spend. Or take Australia, they have reasonable availability, but they also have one of the highest tariffs. So there seems to be no correlation between the two. So it doesn't make any sense. So the idea is, should you do a senseless tariffing? No, because there are examples which make sense. Which are those? For us, Singapore is a good example. Singapore has no water reserves, right? It takes 50% water, used to take 50% water from Malaysia, terrestrial area. 30% water was desalinated, 20% was sewage, which was recycled, right? And they price the water for what it's worth. So if you see, the availability and tariff are somewhat correlated. And mine, if I had to gaze at the crystal ball, I would say for the domestic customers, price the water right. Okay? This is my model. I'll quickly take through that because I guess I have only a few minutes left. My sense is, if you have to create a common template for everybody, what should that template be? It should be based for tariffing on quantum usage affordability. Yeah? So if you take it a 3x3 matrix, the sectors which have high affordability and unrestricted use of water should pay the highest. And the people who have the least affordability and restricted access of water should be paying the least amount of tariffs. And water will always be a political subject. So you cannot dispense with the affordability aspect because the politicians will not allow you to do that. So you have to put it in the equation. It is in the equation, but it gets put in the equation in the context of what usage norms are you imposing on that. So if this model was to be put in place, the problem will be solved. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the utopian view. But as you know, utopia doesn't will run or happen, right? If the utopian option was to play, then this is what things should be done and what should happen. My sense is it's unlikely given the political compulsions and the fact that water is not necessarily a subject where people and rationality will play a role, but politics will. So what I believe is going to happen, which is more like a pragmatic view of what will happen, I think what is going to happen is government is going to say water recycling, shove it down the throat of people for domestic and industry. Because that's the only way you'll be able to get a bang for the buck. For the desalination plant, India has a 6,100-kilometer coastline, one of the longest in the world. So you can theoretically have one water purification plant every 100 kilometers, that's 60 desalination plants. Theoretically it will work. But guess what? The cost of purification is fairly high, 10 paisa a liter. So imagine a household which is paying less than 100 rupees will now have to shell out 2.5 to 3K. Are you willing to do that? I don't know. So it's still on the table, but that's a political will that's required to be done. And finally, river interlinking projects for all the three sectors. This is recycling. I'll not bore you with all the diagrams, but generally what it says is, jitna pani aa raha hai, you purify it, use it for other applications, non-drinkable, but you can also use it for drinking application. It's just the mindset that you have. I'm not going to drink the sewage water. But be as it may, you can use that, and that, in my mind, is going to come as a regulation very soon. It's already there in the big cities. In the smaller towns, it's going to follow suit sooner than later. Desalination, it has some multiple steps. You have ultrafiltration, screening, so on and so forth. Chennai is already doing this, and that's why their water tariff is currently in this range, 2.5 to 3K per month. Almost close to your electricity bill, right? So that's the right price of water. So if anybody wants to do that, which Chennai has done and other coastal towns will do, that's what it will look like. And finally, the river interlinking project. Flora, fauna, challenges notwithstanding, if India was to magically connect like a power grid, all its river, it can regulate the flow of water whenever there is drought or whenever there is floods. So you can theoretically do it. Of course, there is environmental challenges there because once you try to work against the nature, you never know how the nature will hit back. So this is an option. It's a very pet project of the government. They believe that this is what needs to be done. For political or infrastructure reasons, if they do that, this will be the third area that they'll expand into. But in any case, and this is my last slide, I have no idea what will happen in 5 or 10 years. It will be the utopian approach, it may be the pragmatic approach. And it could be a hybrid of both, who knows? Stranger things happen in the world. But one thing I'm sure of, and that is water will not be a subject where you gloss over. Because from now on, everybody will start thinking about it very, very carefully. Thank you very much.